Okay, so this year the United Nations held its 62nd session of the Commission on the Status of Women at its headquarters in New York from March 12th to the 23rd. Okay. This year's priority theme was empowering rural women and girls and highlighted the challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in rural areas worldwide. This year, ARS had organized... Oh, genetic. Okay. So this year, the theme of the event was regarding rural women and girls. So people who don't live in cities, people who don't have access to land, people who live on wide areas of land, some that have resources, some that do not. They have very restricted access to basic necessities, and that was the focus of the challenges that organizations like ARS focused on this year. So this year, 55 members of ARS participated in the event from all over the world. That included the US, both East Coast and West Coast, Canada, which was the two of us, and Unghs from Toronto, Greece, and Armenia. So on Sunday, March the 11th, they hosted an orientation event where all the ARS members that were participating got together at the Armenian church. We shared a meal, and they presented to us the focuses of the ARS activity in the United Nations and what an instrumental role it has, and the importance of the consultative status to ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, because of ARS's history in philanthropic and humanitarian work. People don't realize how important and how exclusive this status is, and we should be proud that ARS has this status with the UN and is continuing to maintain its position on the UN roster. So the main event that the permanent mission of Armenia to the UN held was titled Rural Women and Girls, Initiating Economic and Social Development Opportunities in Armenia. The panel featured 3 speakers, but the opening remarks were made by Mr. Zorab Mnatsaganyan, who's Armenia's permanent representative to the UN. So he's Armenia's ambassador to the UN. The focus was on ARS's work in Armenia that Hoori is going to expand upon. The speakers were Toby Wicks, who is a PhD, and he has worked with ARS, and he's from UNICEF. ARS Chiloyan, who did an internship with an organization in Armenia. Hoori will expand on that. And Dr. Nairi Devderian. So now Hoori will discuss the topics and talk about what kind of role ARS plays in these organizations, and not just the organizations, but what they're building in Armenia to help these rural women and girls, because it is very important to our organization and us as women as well.
Thank you. So as Seta mentioned, there were 3 speakers at the event that was held in collaboration with the ARS and the Permanent Mission of Armenia to the UN. So I'm going to touch first on Aras Chiloyan's speech, which, as Seta mentioned, she was a former intern at the Homeland Development Initiative Foundation, HDIF Armenia. It's a pretty recent organization. It was founded in March 2013. And the foundation's efforts are towards empowering rural and disenfranchised Armenian women. And the way they actually do this is by utilizing their artisanal handcrafting skills. So essentially, these women are sewing all kinds of handicrafts using traditional, obviously, Armenian methods. And through the platform of the HDIF, they're receiving further training in business skills, financial skills, so that they become independent business owners and operators. And they do also sell their products through the HDIF. So the HDIF is currently doing this with rural female women in over 10 villages and towns across Armenia. And the great news is that the females are paid approximately 20% above Armenia's minimum wage. So this is a great way for them to support their families. It's really a way of lifting these families out of poverty. And then obviously the speaker on behalf of the ARS was Dr. Naidi Derderian, who's the vice chairperson to the ARS Central Executive Board. So she presented several of the ARS's different projects that aim to empower rural Armenian women and girls. I'm sure many of you have heard of some of these. Obviously, one of the main focuses was the ARS Mother and Child Health and Birthing Center in Hoorian. So there were some really interesting facts, actually. Since the medical center was founded in 1997, it has treated over 150,000 patients in the region. And the birthing center did open later in 2005, and it's recorded over 14,500 births. So it's clearly having an impact in that, more rural region and supporting the community there. Also touched upon were the work of the ARS Sose kindergartens. Obviously, a bit of a different focus. The focus in that case is education and empowering girls, and obviously from a young age, in order to get an education and to empower them through that method. And then finally, there was mention of the more recent ARS Sponsor a Daughter program. So in order to encourage women in these areas to have second or third daughters, I think it's a bit of an issue where, some people choose to abort female babies because they prefer to have boys. And so in order to encourage them to have second or third daughters, ARS has started the Sponsor a Daughter program, where they provide some financial support to families that do choose to have these second or third daughters. And finally, one interesting one that I actually hadn't heard about before, the ARS, in collaboration with the United Nations Development Program, has a new project. So UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, has a project called Integrated Support to Rural Development, Building Resilient Communities. And so as part of this program, the ARS has financed several greenhouses in the Tavush province of Armenia, which is actually, it borders both Georgia and Azerbaijan, this region. And so the ARS has basically donated a couple of these greenhouses to female rural members in this area, and the hope is that these rural families will become economically sufficient through these greenhouses. So essentially they're receiving training in terms of how to plant in greenhouses, how to make the greenhouse successful, and they're also given the high quality seeds to plant in the greenhouses, and essentially these families then grow their crops and can sell them basically on their own terms and become financially self-sufficient. Yeah, and can stay in the region, because obviously part of the issues are, around these rural communities. A lot of the time, the issue is, they're usually dependent on the land, and agriculture is the main industry, but people either don't have access to the land, or the land isn't necessarily as easy to farm in some of these hilly regions especially. And so one of the themes that we heard throughout the sessions was about access to land and how to help women, especially in these agriculture focused areas. So I think that's it. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, I have it.
Միայն մեկ բան գուզեին գսել, որ կքաչալերենք բոլորին, որ հարաճիգի դարիներուն իրենք հալ մտածեն թերևս մասնակցիլ այս conference-ին, United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, շատ հաջելի ժամանակն ունեցանք այս տարի, ինչպես գերու իրենը սավ շատ աղվոր ցևով գազմագերբված էր այս տարի, անցյալ տարի քացինքն է քիչ մը դժվարություններ կային եւ շատ հոմուներ չի գային, որտեվ օդը բավական քեշ էր այդ օրերը, բայց այս տարի, այսինքն ինչպես ընկերուհի Սետան նստավ 55 հոմուհիներ գային, աշխարհի բոլոր կողմեն, մեծամասնությունը անշուշտ ամերիկայեն, բայց լավ ցև մնե, որ ուրիշներուն հանդիպիկ եւ նաեւ ավելի միջազգային թեմի վրա տեսնենք ինչ տեսակ գործեր կդանի գոր հոմը